The U.S. has struck 3 key nuclear sites in Iran, officially entering Israel's conflict with Iran militarily. Iran, in response, is threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, through which over a fifth of the world's oil supply passes each day. And President Lee Jae-myung called on all the relevant South Korean authorities to put in place an emergency response system over the Middle East tensions in his first meeting with the senior presidential aides since taking office. Lee's top security advisor, Ri Sung-rak, will attend this week's NATO summit instead of President Lee due to domestic priorities and the uncertainties in the Middle East. Also on Monday, President Lee filled 11 cabinet positions, including ministers for labor, science, and the environment. And the nominees will undergo parliamentary confirmation hearings, though their appointments don't require the National Assembly's endorsement. We begin in the Middle East. The Trump administration bombed 3 Iranian nuclear facilities under the mission dubbed Operation Midnight Hammer. The U.S. says its strikes inflicted significant damage to the sites. Our Kim Jong-sil starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump called the damage to Iran's nuclear sites monumental in a Truth Social post on Sunday night, reiterating his earlier claim that they had been obliterated. Satellite images show craters at Fordo and collapsed buildings at Isfahan and Natanz. The U.S. Operation Midnight Hammer involved over 125 aircraft, including B-2 bombers, as well as Tomahawk missiles launched from a U.S. submarine. President Trump confirmed the strikes on Saturday evening from the White House.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
While the full extent of the damage is still being assessed, Iranian officials have downplayed the impact, claiming the facilities were evacuated before the bombs hit. The strikes were carried out just days after President Trump's initial announcement of a 2-week window to decide on military action. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended the action, saying it needed to be done.
And I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done.
Rubio echoed Trump's message, saying the door to negotiations remains open, but Iran must choose between peaceful nuclear energy or facing continued military pressure. He added that if Iran persists in becoming a nuclear power, it would put the regime at risk. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged restraint on Sunday, warning that the U.S. strikes could lead to further escalation and calling for diplomacy to avoid more violence. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
After sustaining direct attacks from the U.S., Iran is now reviewing its options. Iranian Defense Minister ordered his army generals to be prepared to fight, while hinting at the closure of a key strait for global oil transportation. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
Iran, after the U.S. bombed key nuclear sites there with bunker busters, is on the verge of retaliating, with Defense Minister Amir Hatami calling for a fight. In a meeting with Army generals on Monday, Hatami said this was nothing new and that the U.S. has been committing crimes against Iran throughout history.
Each time they committed a crime, they received a decisive response, and this time will be no different. We will fight for victory. We consider martyrdom a great blessing, but right now we are fighting for victory.
This comes against the backdrop of Iran's parliament endorsing a measure on Sunday to close the Strait of Hormuz, a major oil transit choke point. According to Iran's state-run broadcaster Press TV on Sunday, the country's legislature reached a consensus to close the strait, the final decision resting with the Supreme National Security Council and the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The Strait of Hormuz, which separates Iran and Oman, is a key gateway for oil shipments from Persian Gulf countries. It's estimated that around 25% of the global crude oil supply and 20% of the liquefied natural gas supply pass through the strait. While a final decision is yet to come, the market is already reacting. On Monday, Brent crude briefly passed $81 per barrel, the highest since January. All in all, Brent has risen over 10% since the Israel-Iran conflict began on June 13 and over 20% in the past month. Meanwhile, on top of the U.S. direct involvement, missile exchanges between Israel and Iran continued, with both nations on the receiving end on Monday. 김도현, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae-myung presided over his first meeting with senior aides on Monday, where he called for an emergency response system to deal with exacerbating crises in the Middle East. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min has more.
Defining the crises in the Middle East as urgent. The focus of President Lee's first meeting with his top aides at the start of the week was on these and their potential impact on the nation.
대통령실을 비롯해서 전 부처가 비상 대응 체계를 좀 갖춰서 비상한 대응을 해야 될 것으로 생각이 됩니다. 특히 현지의 우리 국민들의 안전 대책이 반드시 필요하겠습니다.
Also discussed were ways to tackle instability in the foreign exchange and financial markets. Noting that already high prices might further inflict pain on the people if coupled with higher oil prices, Lee asked for additional measures with regard to the government's recent supplementary budget proposal, if needed, now awaiting approval at the National Assembly. And as the president held his first meeting under a new government, without a transition period, his message to them was specific.
대통령실 업무가 지금 아직 인원도 충분히 다 확정되지 못한 단계이고 또 인력도 좀 부족해서 아마 다들 많이 힘들 겁니다. 그러긴 하지만 언제나 말씀드리는 것처럼 여러분의 한 시간이 5,200만 시간의 가치가 있다.
On Sunday, President Lee Jae-myung decided not to attend the upcoming NATO summit this week in The Hague, hours after the U.S. bombed nuclear sites in Iran over the weekend. He considered participating in the summit, but after long consideration, a final call was made at the last minute. Observers believe the latest incident could have complicated any possible talks between President Lee and his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump, with the U.S. deadline for tariff negotiations looming. National Security Advisor Ri Sung-rak will be attending the meeting on behalf of the president. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now, global financial markets are bracing for the aftermath of Washington's attack on Tehran, and South Korea is no exception. In fact, South Korean stocks ended slightly lower, snapping a 5-day rally on Monday, while the Korean won reached a 1-month low against the dollar. Park Jun-han has the details.
Stocks and the South Korean currency showed volatility across the board on Monday as the risk aversion increased in the aftermath of the U.S. airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. South Korea's benchmark KOSPI closed at 3,014.47 points on Monday, 0.24% lower than Friday's market end. Although the benchmark index secured the 3,000 mark at the close, the market showed volatility as it opened at around 2,990 points. The index then fell to the 2,970s early in the day, but then bounced back to above 3,000. The won's exchange rate against the US dollar opened at 1,375 won on the Seoul foreign exchange market, up 9.41 from the previous session, and widened further to end above 1,384 won, up 18.71 from last Friday's close at 3:30 p.m.
The volatility seems to be funneled into the dollar, as it is the world's reserve currency, causing the exchange rate to rise despite the U.S. being a party to the conflict.
If Iran decides to fully block the Strait of Hormuz, it would disrupt global energy supply chains and send shockwaves through oil markets, hitting energy-dependent economies like South Korea especially hard. According to the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, 99% of Middle Eastern crude imported by Korea travels through the strait. Meanwhile, with uncertainty mounting, the government held an emergency interagency meeting on Monday. It said it will crack down on unfair oil price hikes and keep domestic fuel prices in check. The authorities also plan to closely monitor financial markets and act quickly if volatility spikes. Park Junan, Arirang News.
Following a round of vice ministerial appointments, President Lee Jae-myung on Monday named his first cabinet picks. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yu-jin breaks down the key nominations.
In his third week in office, President Lee Jae-myung unveiled his first cabinet lineup on Monday, nominating 11 ministers. Five-term lawmaker An Kyu-baek has been nominated to be defense minister. If confirmed, he would become the first civilian in over 6 decades to head South Korea's defense ministry. Cho Hyun, a veteran diplomat and former vice foreign minister, has been nominated to head the foreign ministry. With his deep experience in multilateral diplomacy and trade, he's expected to navigate diplomatic hurdles with National Security Advisor Wi Sung-rak, an expert in bilateral ties, and North Korea. Chung Dong-young, who previously served as unification minister under the late President Roh Moo-hyun, has been nominated once again, signaling the administration's emphasis on peace through dialogue with North Korea.
The nominees have been tasked with clear missions, including advancing national interest-driven diplomacy, easing tensions on the Korean Peninsula, reforming the military, addressing the climate crisis, and developing the Arctic shipping route. They're expected to produce tangible outcomes.
President Lee's pragmatic approach was also evident in his decision to retain Agriculture Minister Song Mi-ryong.
Minister Song is expected to ensure continuity in addressing agriculture's climate-related challenges and regional population decline. Her reappointment reflects the administration's merit-based approach, beyond ideological lines.
Notably, some appointments came from the private sector. Bae Kyung-hoon, head of LG AI Research, has been nominated as Minister of Science and ICT, while Han Sung-suk, former CEO of Naver, was named Minister of SMEs and Startups. Other nominees include heads for the Ministries of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, Environment, Employment and Labor, Gender Equality and Family, as well as Oceans and Fisheries. Except for Minister Song, all 10 candidates will face confirmation hearings at the National Assembly. President Lee is calling for swift proceedings so that his cabinet can quickly respond to growing challenges, such as the situation in the Middle East. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung spoke over the phone today with Indonesian President Subianto Prabowo today for the first time since taking office. The two leaders appreciated the strategic partnership between the two countries and agreed to strengthen such cooperation in trade, digital transition, and the defense ministry. President Lee also held a phone call earlier in the day with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, where they discussed cooperation in trade and investment. They also agreed to work to conclude their bilateral free trade agreement within this year. Both the foreign leaders congratulated Lee on his inauguration and agreed to expand communications at the APEC summit here in Korea later this year. And now, on to our weekly installment of stories to celebrate 6 years of normalized Seoul-Tokyo relations. If K-pop and K-dramas have been visually striking materials in Japan, K-literature has long been there, making its understated yet powerful presence. An Sung-jin tells us more.
On a rainy street in Tokyo, a sign with the word tech colored in red stands out. This is a street in Jinbocho, known as one of the world's oldest bookstore districts, located in Tokyo, and also where the only Korean bookstore in the district stands. But Techgori is more than a bookstore. It's a gateway to Korea. When Kim Sung-bok opened her first publishing company in 2007, Hallyu had only just arrived in Japan. Some told her that her endeavor to introduce it was useless, but Kim said she had faith.
Through these small efforts, a lot more people began to notice us. It's been deeply rewarding to see Japan's publishing industry recognize our work and have Japanese readers seek out Korean literature. Even literary critics here finally acknowledged its value as well.
Ranging from novels, essays, and poetry to picture books, now there are more than 1,000 books to quench the desire of Korean learners and Korean culture enthusiasts in the bookstore. She has been running since 2015. Kim's first translated book, published here in Japan, was Hangang's The Vegetarian. She said that of all the works she read in the 2000s, this novel stood out the most due to its powerful resonance with Japanese society.
Did Hangang become famous because of the Nobel Prize? Not really. If anything, I'd say the Nobel Committee was late to the party. But yes, after the Nobel buzz, her book sold in huge numbers with multiple reprints and strong sales. What surprised me most, though, was how many middle-aged men came in specifically to buy her books.
But she added that beyond Hangang's books, as Korea's cultural standing has risen tremendously, there is a genuine admiration for Korea's creative content, which helps those like Kim working in content and publishing. There are also trends in literature that show parallels between Korea and Japan.
Right now, there's a growing interest in caregiving here in Japan, and I've been pitching some of these books to publishers. We're also seeing a wave of feminist books and essays exploring new forms of family, a theme that feels timely and also resonates with what Japanese readers are interested in today.
And to further fuel interest, from poetry readings, workshops, and author visits, the bookstore offers a bridge to mutual understanding. This publisher hosts around 100 events annually to introduce Korean literature to the Japanese public.
What's appealing about Korean literature is that you can clearly sense the writer's perspective on the history of societal issues. So, through their works, you're able to see various aspects of Korea's past and present. If more translations of other genres like poetry or comics were introduced, I think that could spark a wider interest.
I'm currently studying Korean literature translation through the Chekori translation class. I'm interested in Korean literature or novels because it often delves deep into social issues and the inner humanity of human nature.
As Korean literature continues to find its voice in Japan, through committed publishers like Kim, aspiring translators, and communities like Chekori, what was once marginal is becoming mainstream. With trends and stories that speak across borders, literature is becoming a tool to broaden the cultural landscape. An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Tokyo.
Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. For that, we have our sports editor, Paul Neitz, joining us in the studio. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Why don't we start with football? The South Korean national team squads were announced ahead of the East Asia Cup today, right?
Yes, that's right. The EAFF E-1 Football Championships that are being held in Korea next month. For the men's team, 20 of the 23-man squad are players from the K-League, with 3 from the J-League in Japan. The 2 Kim Tae-hyuns, 1 from Kashima Antlers in Japan and 1 from Jeonbuk, as well as Ulsan's So Myung-kwan, Gangwon's So Min-woo, Gimcheon's Lee Sung-won, Byun-jun-soo of Gwangju and Pohang's Lee Ho-jae are all in a full national team squad for the very first time. South Korea's men's games are being played at Yongin Mira Stadium. It's a single group of 4 in a round-robin format consisting of South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong and China, with matches set to begin on July 7th. Japan won the last edition in 2022, but South Korea has the most titles with 5, the last being in 2019. Meanwhile, the female players, their competition will be between South Korea, Japan, China and Taiwan, and matches start on July 9th with games to take place at Hwasong Stadium and Suwon World Cup Stadium. There are 9 overseas-based stars in the squad, including legendary Ji Soyeon, as well as Kim Shin-ji of AS Roma, Lee Gun-min and Che Yu-ri of Birmingham City, and Lee Young-ju of Levante Badalona.
Well, some soccer fun to look forward to in the coming month. Paul, moving on to table tennis. Not 1, but 2 WTT medals for Im Jong-hoon, right?
Yes, indeed, yes, in the mixed doubles and the men's doubles as well. At the 2025 WTT Star Contender in Slovenia on Sunday, Im won the mixed doubles with Shin Yu-bin, as well as the men's doubles with An Jae-hyun. In the mixed doubles, the pair dominated Brazil's Hugo Calderano and Bruno Takahashi in straight sets. It marks their return to the top after a WTT win earlier this year in India. In the men's doubles final, Im and An stunned the world #1 French duo, the Lebrun brothers Felix and Alexis, with a clean 3-0 sweep.
Well, now to baseball and the KBO, the Gia Tigers, they extended their winning streak to 6 wins, right?
6 wins in a row, and that has moved them up to 4th place in the standings. This comes following a comeback win over the SSG Landers on Sunday. The Tigers were down 2-3 in the 8th inning, but Kim Sok-hwan's 2-run homer turned the game around. Then Kim Ho-ryung's sacrifice fly in the 9th sealed the 5-4 win. The Tigers now sit just 2.5 games behind 3rd place, the Lotte Giants, and 4.5 games behind the league leaders, the Hanwha Eagles. Kia have been in great form this month with 12 wins, 1 draw, and just 5 losses, boasting a win rate of over 70%.
Good for the Gia Tigers. Now, finally, to MLB, Kim Hae-sung of the LA Dodgers, didn't he play a key role in the whopping 13-7 win over the Washington Nationals?
He did indeed, yes. He went 1 for 4 and it hit his 5th double of the season. He later reached base again on an error in the 7th inning, sparking a big rally that broke the game wide open. Though the error didn't count as a hit, it did lead to a bases-loaded opportunity, setting the stage for Shohei Ohtani's bases-clearing triple. Meanwhile, Kim Hae-sung of the Tampa Bay Rays is back on the road to recovery from a shoulder injury. He went 1 for 4 with a walk, a run and 2 steals during a Triple-A match on Friday, his first game since June 12th, following a hamstring issue.
All right, Paul, thanks as always for coming in. I'll see you next Monday.
Thank you, yeah.
A heat wave of more than 30 degrees appeared nationwide. It was even hotter than yesterday. Daytime temperatures in Seoul rose to 32 degrees Celsius, and Yanggu was as hot as 33 degrees, about 2 to 5 degrees higher than yesterday all over the country. Please take good care of your health. Rain that started again in Jeju Island this afternoon will spread nationwide tomorrow. Starting with the south coast at dawn tomorrow, it will reach the southern parts of the country tomorrow morning and the central regions in the afternoon. Up to 60 millimeters of rain is expected in inland areas for 2 days. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off at 23 degrees, Chuncheon 19 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 30 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 26 degrees in Daejeon. On this weekend, more rain is expected mainly in the central parts of the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.